What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Dynasty Underdog. No Uriah Dawkins tonight, but we have a full show sheet, and we have Jake here. How you doing, man?
Good, good, good. I told the group on private message that I basically took natural ayahuasca, aka I went out to the woods and had no cell phone service for like 48 or 72 hours, and I'm reborn again. So yeah, it's been great, dude.
Yeah,
How about yourself?
I totally dropped the ball there. Not calling you ayahuasca, Jake. Just right out the gate. So yeah, Jake definitely, Jake definitely, got some rest and relaxation, came back with some really cool topics that we're going to get into today, some really fun stuff. So it's exciting. But before we do that, something else that's super exciting, Scott Fish Bowl. We're all, not all, but I mean, we happen to all be in it, which is super fun. I think, is this your first year, Jake, in Scott Fish Bowl?
Second, thank you very
Second.
much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Jesus Christ. Excuse me. So yeah, no, that's it's very exciting. And I know your eyes in it as well. So it's definitely fun. We get to all experience it. A bunch of people in the Discord, but why don't we just like check in, see how we're doing? Any thoughts from you, strategy wise? Anything standing out from your leagues
Yeah,
or
I would
your
say
league?
that.
I should say league.
Yeah, I guess it's only one league. Although I have been checking the Scott Fishbowl tool on what is that, fantasylife.com, I want to say.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you can kind of live vicariously through a lot of different leagues on there. So highly recommend going on there as a separate tool. It will help you out. But one of the things that I would say that I've kind of noticed is just that folks are not necessarily diving into the scoring settings, it feels like, enough, and really understanding like
Okay.
what assets are going to be scoring the most given the changes year over year. And I don't know, it feels like folks are just like drafting almost like standard redraft with two super flex, and I just don't really get it. So
Mhm.
that's one of the things that I've just noticed in my draft. What about you?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good observation, and I'm sorry I can barely keep it together with the comments. Like, this is impossible. I don't know how people do this, but Jay says they let you join from OTAs, land on the lamb. For those in the Discord, Jake has his little nickname in there. But yeah, so I mean, the thing that I think is interesting is you and I were talking about it in between our two drafts. Ours are almost completely opposite in
Yeah.
how they were drafted. Like I think CMC went first in years like 3 running backs in a row or
Hmm.
something like that. And so, ours was like 2 quarterbacks and then Jamar Chase. And then I think CMC went 112 and like it was completely flip flopped almost. So everybody's kind of doing a different thing. And to Jake's point, I don't know if everybody is diving into the scoring setting as much. I don't think there's like even that much to like understand either this year. It's really all based around like, again, volume is what it says, but like points per carry and points per target, points per reception. That's about it, right? It's just like, you know, high bonuses for those. And so it's not that complicated, but people are certainly seeming to ignore it. I mean, my league ignored the running back scoring for sure initially. But I think maybe that's just kind of, and my view is too, I was like, there are a lot of running backs who are going to score a ton of points. Like, so I could probably get some not having to draft one in the first 3 or 4 picks, you know what I mean, while still securing a top end quarterback to fill one of those spots. So I think I got Brees Hall in like the end of the third round, or maybe beginning, yeah, I think end of the third round or something like that, and that was my first running back. I felt pretty comfortable with that, and there's a couple more targets out there for sure. But yeah, I don't know, like definitely my league people were not adjusting to the running back settings, which may help me in that league, but I don't know across the board if that's what everybody's experiencing.
Yeah. No, it's a really good point. And the same thing with the kind of like tight end or elite tight end bump. So in my league, I will say that they did notice that Bowers McBride end up going 1.7 and 1.8, or the 107, 108. And like for me, I think that feels about right, given that it's basically 3.5 points. So an additional tight end premium, one tight end premium on top of wide receivers. But it's really difficult to not want to kind of dive into that. And I've seen other drafts where you can get McBride almost in like mid second round, and that just feels like really, really good value if you're lucky enough to get into a situation like that. I ended up going and picking from the 111. That's just naturally where I wanted to pick, and ended up going there. So I ended up going Lamar actually at the 111. He fell all the way there, and then went Bucky, JT, Kenneth Walker, and Quinshon Judkins. So I'm going basically super, super running back heavy. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident in the way that that build is going to work as long as folks stay healthy. The funny thing is, I was going to go James Conner over Kenneth Walker, didn't get the opportunity, and I was actually hoping to go Laporta instead of Judkins, but the pick after me ends up going Laporta, and it made me kind of second guess my thought process of whether or not I should have gone Laporta and then go
Mm.
one of Kenneth Walker or Quinshon Judkins, because I don't think that the differentiation between the two of them is going to be that drastic. So all in all, I'm pretty excited about where things are at, and I have kind of like the general basis of how I want my team to move forward. I've already queued it up, and I don't want to move away from it. Like, I'm very stuck in my way right now. Like, I know how I want to build this fucking team, unlike last year where like I think I had the highest scoring team in my division for the last like 7 weeks because I went so rookie heavy. But
Hmm.
I think I started off the year, if you remember correctly, because it was against the median, like 0-10 or 0-12, and I was
And
like,
still
"Oh,
made the playoffs or something, and like you still can make the
no, I
playoffs. Yeah.
just missed. I
No, you
just
just
missed.
missed. I know you had a
I
chance
came all the
for a
way
lot of the
back.
year.
Yeah, I came all the way back,
Jeez.
and then in the last week, I think all I needed was to win out completely, and I ended up losing against the median. So shit happens. But I'm pretty excited about where this team can go. And I think, to your point, the scoring settings are a little more vanilla than last year, where you can get kind of a lot of bumps from like kick returners and things like that. We do have the weird IDP bump that I think will literally was made for like a singular player, which I found pretty interesting. But outside of that, it is kind of just there.
Well, yeah, there's like the QB settings have been very different in the past or very nuanced, and they're pretty vanilla this year. And so, really just driven towards the skill players at that point. You are making me think I probably should have went George Kittle at the 4-2, which makes
Yeah,
me feel bad, which makes me feel
definitely.
very bad about myself. But yeah, in this draft, Bowers went 2-1, and then McBride went 2-3.
Whew.
So again,
Yeah.
like people aren't adjusting much. I faded Bucky as well. I probably should have drafted him too,
No,
but
I think that's
whatever.
completely fair. I think there's enough statistical evidence to show that Bucky probably won't have as strong of a year two as he did a year one. But I tend to, especially in these types of formats, go with like optimal ceiling value because I don't have money attached to it. So
You're right.
I'm
Yeah,
like, I
of
could be a
course.
dreamer right now. So I'll be a
Yeah, yeah,
dreamer,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
I mean, I faded Bucky at the 211 and got Brees at 311, so I'm like much more
Okay.
comfortable
Yeah,
with that. You know what I mean? Granted, obviously
that's
the
fair.
situation is a lot different, but I feel better about that. But yeah, SFB is fun. Got a couple comments here. Joe, first year for me. Pittsburgh live drafts are
Congrats,
all over the
Joe.
place. Yeah, congrats. And the live drafts are probably insane. So I can imagine they're a lot of fun, but also hectic. Picking and stuff like that is probably crazy. Jay got the eighth spot, and I'm mixed on it so far. Happy with JT at the 205 for sure. Definitely. Uh, Roughly how much should running backs be bumped up in point 0.5 PPR? Is that just a dynasty question, I would assume? Uh, yeah. I mean, I don't typically bump them up that much, to be honest. I don't know about you, Jake. I mean, obviously there is like it's more of like a downgrade for a wide receiver than it is like a bump for I guess it's the same thing, right? Same thing, split two different ways. But um yeah, I don't do that much, I guess, for me. It's going to be more on like like player specific basis, right? Like where it's like I'm going to move Jackson Smith and Jigba down probably a little bit, right? Because like you're more reliant on pass catching, so it's going to be a lot more situational for me, I feel like, than it is going to be just like a, you know, general bump
Yeah, I'd
up.
also say probably roster settings will also be really important in those types of
Mhm.
setups too. So I just want to make sure that if it is, a forced start two at running back, I'm probably going to go with like multiple flex. I'm going to probably go a little bit heavier with my starting running backs versus wide receivers, just knowing that the depth wide receivers in that type of setup will probably be either PPR heavy, because that's kind of the, I guess, perceived value from people who aren't playing true PPR, or people who are playing true PPR to then half point PPR. And then moving into guys like Devontae Adams or Mike Evans, like those would be kind of the higher end assets that I'd want to get into those flex positions if I could, for relatively cheap in a dynasty format where it's only half PPR, knowing that you are getting, high touchdown upside players. Same thing with even someone like probably DK Metcalf this year, just given the wide receiver depth, things like that.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Awesome. Fun SFB talk. Good questions. All right. So I wanted to quickly talk about something I've been thinking about and decided to pull some data on. Kind of measuring more league activity than trade activity, but I ended up using kind of trade activity to measure just general like community activity. Because like I had said this, I think a few weeks ago, or at least I wrote it down, that I just felt like there was some lulls after some pretty big spikes in activity in leagues, right? Like you could like feel it. Like there was just a bunch of stuff going on, and then all of a sudden it's like no, there's still obviously trades are happening, but it's a lot less, and you can kind of really feel it. And I'm wondering if there's anything actionable about this data. So I wanted to throw it up here real quick for the viewers and kind of talk through it for the listeners. But so what I did here is I pulled from Dynasty Daddy the number of trades per month over the last calendar year, pretty much. I went a little bit further back, but that's pretty much what I was doing. It's about a year and a half here. And so what you end up seeing is a pretty clear pattern of, spikes and dips around certain, times of the year. And, obviously around rookie fever, rookie draft season, combine, NFL draft, all that stuff, you're going to see a spike. So in, the April, May months, you see a pretty big spike. And then after that, June, July, it dips down significantly from there. So if we're looking back at last year, in May, 170,000 trades in May, dips down in June to about 70,000. So 100,000 dip, and then 55,000 in July. And then it starts picking back up in August, September, when the season kind of gets going and people are, looking more into the league. There's more news, all that good stuff, preseason, all that stuff is kind of getting going, right? It makes sense. Come to December, January, things settle down, of course, because we get into the playoffs or whatever. We're, done with the leagues for the most part. Really dips down. Those are the times where you see about no trades happening, 20,000, about 20,000 trades, January, February. So the most significant dip there. And then if we're looking back, if we're looking to this year in May, spikes back up to 240,000, pretty much rounding up here. And then you see the dip again, back down to June, 88,000, and then right now 12,000 in July. As we're at the beginning of July, obviously that'll pick up a bit, but it'll probably be somewhere around 50, 60,000. Obviously, there's more trades right now. Not obviously, I think that is interesting. From last May to this May, a ton more trades. Meaning, I would say that that's probably a signifier that there's a lot more dynasty players probably than there were the year prior. So that's just like a really, baseline kind of detail here. But I'll throw it to Jake after all that. Any thoughts about this data, how you could use it?
It's funny because for me, actionability is always going to be attacking the lulls. But the reality is I guess trying to understand what types of trades also happen within those lulls. Are there windows where the value of those players are depreciating at such a point where I do feel like I'm getting better value? Or is the likelihood of me actually gaining value going to be in kind of those crazy frenzied periods where everyone's making trades and you can kind of get lost in those windows, right? Like getting lost in the windows is actually a really good thing to do if you want to hide trade value, or if you want to hide potentially multiple moves you're trying to make. This is something that I always try and do, where if I get a deal done, usually for a elite asset, I'm always going to try and make other trades
Hmm.
happen to either try and limit or devalue that trade in some way, shape, or form so that folks can either start thinking about values towards other players, recency bias, try and take advantage of that. Here, the biggest thing that I would say is like the in-season activity looks pretty consistent no matter what. So it's like you do get a slight bump towards fantasy playoffs, which I think is really interesting. I think that makes a lot of sense. Teams are probably moving in different directions at that point. Contenders who thought they were contenders are no longer contenders, and they're moving in the opposite direction, going for future picks, assets, etc. But like for me, I think it's going to be trying to understand and analyze a little bit more about what the value differentiation looks like in those completely dead windows and see how I can try and take advantage of them. Because maybe that's where also value gets lost,
Mm.
where people aren't paying attention at all. Maybe they're not even looking at the notifications, things like that. That is one of the things that I've always noticed in a lot of dynasty leagues is that sometimes when trades happen in that January, February time period, some folks don't even see the trade. Like you can actually finish the year sometimes where there are people who don't log in to that league or
Yeah,
check the
yeah.
feed until the next season where the league gets started up again. And that's happened a couple of times where people have been like, wait, when did that trade happen? Like, oh, when did you get so and so? And you're like, oh, well, you can check you can check the player's profile on Sleeper, you know? So that would be my biggest thing is like either take advantage of the frenzied periods and try and hide value or hide value in those the January, February windows where there's less trades happening, knowing that people are going to be, I guess, more inactive. As stupid as that sounds. What about you?
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, it's a good point, like thinking through that though, right? Like in those off-season lulls, like what can you do? And I think, it's quiet, but you can still make deals. To your point, like obviously certain people aren't going to answer, and like those are helpless. Like you can't really do much about that. But there are going to be people who are checking things out, and I think those rebuilding managers, like you could potentially, either trade for those like unsexy veterans that could work for your contending team. Obviously, I'm going to try to stay away from running backs typically, but I think there's a way to kind of find yourself into those, especially in those lulls where people are like, yeah, I'm not really trying to do much, but then you're trading for something that they may not really be super interested in. You might be able to get it at a value, right? So I think that's something you could try to do in those lulls, but it's looking at this and knowing that there's going to be so much activity around May. If you are doing the work or listening to people who are doing the work and you're just kind of paying attention and really kind of sticking with everything, have your finger on the pulse, I think you can prepare for those time periods and have like better trade targets than most people would, right? Like if you know about the rookie class and you're really locked in, you're going to be much more prepared to attack than other people are who are kind of unaware. You'll be able to go for those pieces and probably get them at values when they're just rookies to these other people, right? To you, they actually have some sort of value based on the work that you've been doing. So I think like that's kind of where I was going with it. I don't know if there's anything else we can really take from this data, but I just thought it was so interesting that like I felt it and I kind of pulled it. And again, this is from Dynasty Daddy, and they have the trade database, and so I just went through there and kind of manually went month by month and grabbed the total trades completed throughout all leagues. So this is like any kind of one QB or two QB, so Superflex, everything, all kind of leagues. And so I just thought it was super interesting. But I guess, is there anything else from you, Jake, before we move on from this?
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is I'll throw in, I guess, something that I did already this past window. So I took up, I guess, 3 of the trades that happened in those 44,000 trades in January and February. And like I got into Brock Purdy in a bunch of different leagues, knowing that the narrative was
Mm.
like whether or not he was going to sign a new contract. That's a perfect example. The Amon-Ra St. Brown window, where folks were scared of what was going to happen with Ben Johnson. This was actually before Ben Johnson signs the contract with Chicago, got into him for pretty cheap. That was the 102 and the 107 for Njoku, Amon-Ra, and a third. And then I also got out of Marvin Harrison Jr. in that same window for the 107 again. A 27 first ends the 202. And like, I just think that there's different ways to maneuver through those spaces to try and just encapsulate value. Cause like, for instance, I ended up using that 107 in a completely different way and then went a different direction towards the draft, knowing that that 107 was going to continue to increase in value. Like, I think there are just so many ways to move through those individual windows where value seems to be almost dead, especially for the rookie picks, and see who's really into the rookie picks and see who's out, see which narratives are kind of haunting individual profiles. And
Right.
that's what I was trying to do, especially on that specific build coming
Well,
from a
yeah.
rebuild.
To your point, like those periods where it's dead are good periods to use those picks, like you're talking about, and go to those rebuilders and be like, hey, like, and this is early before you're, just kind of trying to get a feel for it, but you can go to them and they may, you may get a really sweet deal from them because they just want to get into picks, and you have the one, like
Mm-hmm.
you're saying, 07, 108, maybe a later pick. You're like, it's not going to be that valuable, and you can get like a really, really solid second year player plus a pick or something like that for that first, you know what I mean? And there you're making out, and it's just the time of year you kind of can take advantage of that. So, I mean, one thing you can do with this too, I for sure think I want to kind of do something like this is look at this and kind of build almost like a cycle or like a trade like activity calendar for myself of like what you can just kind of prepare for in these different cycles or what you would like to do, right? And you can hash it out more and like have a lot more clear cut ideas of like, okay, it's this time of year, like these are the kind of things that I would be doing that would be best based on the trade activity or the league activity. So that's definitely one thing you can do with it as well. I do think one other thing I did write down was like after that period of like rookie fever where it's like super hot and the pace slows and there's few opportunities, but there's like less people going after kind of all the different assets, right? So you can kind of use that time to, I think, like acquire vets on the cheap sometimes, and or just like offload, high, rookies that are like overhyped, stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, just like I think in that period where things are cooling off is a good time to sometimes attack those different profiles in those different ways. But yeah, so I think there's a lot you can do with this actually, or like more than you think of when you like first look at it. But I definitely think understanding the periods and like which trade activity it goes up and down is really really helpful. That fluctuation is good to understand. And like even here, like the one thing that I was thinking about is like throughout the season there's actually quite a few trades. Like it's not like it's a dead period. So like if you are a team that's out of it, like you have to know that you can still be doing a lot in season, right? Like if you're one of those rebuilders, it's not like you only attack things at the rookie draft and then you're like, all right, I'm good. I'll just let this ride and let these things develop. Like, I'll develop these rookies on my bet. No, you got to like still make some moves because there are clearly a lot of people, contenders for sure, who are trying to, do something. They're losing players to injury, whatever it may be. And there's a lot of trade activity still happening. So you got to, in season is definitely a key time to keep attacking if you're out of it, even if you're out of it. All right. So good stuff there. Thank you for indulging me. I just got interested and here we are. So yeah.
It's great
All
work.
right. It's fun stuff. All right. We will move on. Let's talk Dynasty Evangelism. So this really comes from me finding myself in a ton of situations where I'm like, it's like, what's your hobby or what do you like doing? And I have like other stuff to say too, but this is like one of my main things I do. So I'm going to fucking say it. Who cares? It's not like, shouldn't be ashamed of it because it's fantasy or something like that. Like, even though it kind of feels that way because I'm like into this so heavily. But so, I end up finding myself in situations where I'm like talking about it or whatever. And it's like a little overwhelming, I feel like, to people. And so I'm thinking to myself, cause like you want to get more people into this. I've gotten more people into this. It's not like I don't know how to do this necessarily, but I think a big part of like, our community and everything is like, we want to get more people into Dynasty and stuff like that. And so I wanted to talk about this really quickly, but the question really is like, how do you approach people who are completely unaware of Dynasty and like explain how they should get involved without sounding insane or overwhelming? And maybe the better question is like, what should you not do? Maybe that's the better question. But I'll throw it out to you and see where it goes.
Yeah, I would not recommend doing what I did and create a league where everyone in the league except for yourself has not played Dynasty before, thinking that you could then be their educator or the
Mhm.
mad professor to help them through. This is still a game. It's very competitive, and people have egos involved in it. I guess like the biggest thing that I would say is like when you are communicating with others, it's really important to just like go from the lens of like talking about how it's nuanced, but without going over the top about it, and definitely not trying to go into details about other adjacent formats, right? Like, I think that that's something that's really common. Is like I see myself talk about Dynasty, and then I'm like, but also there's Devi, and also there's C2C, and they're like, dude, what the fuck are you talking about? And I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I should probably shut the fuck up. You could also do
Mhm.
best ball. You've ever heard of DraftKings before? Oh yeah, you play that? Yeah. Think about that same lineup, but now you have now you can do that with the same lineup year over year. Doesn't that sound fucking sick? Yeah. I think that's kind of where I try and detach myself. I don't have a lot of those conversations anymore after I dug my hole too deep last year. What about you?
Yeah, I think my biggest mistake is going like, nobody really thinks about hit rates and like they're just like, shut the fuck up, dude. Like, what are you talking about? So like I think one of the main sorry. I think one of the main things is to like try to keep it simple. You know what I mean? Basically, if you're trying to get somebody to like understand briefly or you want to get them into it or you just want to talk about it, it's just like redraft, but you keep your players all year long, and you can make trades after that. Like it's pretty straightforward. Keep it like simple, and don't act like it's this crazy thing. But I think one of the better ways that I was thinking about getting people to like I don't know, get excited about it or understand it is like send them, and Sleeper makes this easy, is send them like a link to like a recent draft or in like, show them kind of the league and show them like what it looks like instead of like trying to explain everything and being like, look, this is kind of what it looks like. And you have picks on, as assets, and you can kind of like show it instead of trying to explain like everything that it is, which kind of really does make it sound complex at the end of the day. Other than that, you just have to like, I feel like emphasize what makes it fun. You know what I mean? And try not to get, again, too complex with it and just what makes it fun to you. And probably the best way, and I think that's probably what has gotten some of my friends into it, was like explaining, and I guess it ends up being kind of like an anecdote or something like that. You know what I mean? But it's like, this is like how I got into it, and this is what was fun about it. And it's like, then they kind of get juiced. They're like, yeah, I kind of want to get into that. Or like, you're like, yeah, we could all start a league together and it would be fun. To Jake's point though, could be could be kind of crazy if you do that, but that is at the end of the day how you have to do it. I do think as hard as that has been at times, managing things, you might have done a little bit of that to yourself, like over,
Hmm.
like putting too much on yourself. But also, I think it was a really good thing, and it's been a good thing in general. So at the end of the day, I think you kind of did it the right way, but maybe just put too much on yourself to like make it perfect instead of just letting shit ride. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and to that point, and this will be my last point on this, is I think it's presenting the format for what makes it different, but not going into what you were saying before, the strategy. Like there's no need to provide underlying data as to why you're doing
You can
certain
go
things.
zero running back, bro.
Yeah, like literally, like
Yeah.
there's just no like you guys should listen to Superflex Super Show and learn about QBX, or like
Hmm.
that isn't the way to get people involved in it, because like I do think that it naturally starts off as like, oh, I want to go play this new format.
Hmm.
Awesome. Year one. Year two is I want to get better at that thing if you're really into it. And some people aren't. Some people are just going to be casual about it, and there's no issue with that. But I think it's like that's where I want to sit. But it's like, here's fantasy calc, here's KTC, here's Dynasty Daddy. You go on all those sites and you can then look at all your different builds and you can then go into the trade database. Like, people don't want all that information up front. And so just go at it with the lens of, hey, I'm playing this other fun format. It's really cool. We get to do it 365. There's really no lulls, but at the same time, you control your own schedule about it. And the best part is that all of the moves that you make this year have consequences moving forward. So that means that you have to be even more thoughtful about every single thing that you do. So when you're dropping Lad McConkey in redraft in week 3 last year, like, you can't do that in Dynasty. Like, that's not a feasible task, right?
Doesn't work that way.
Like, you will be a fucking loser. No, but like, seriously, like, that's how I try and rationalize it now. And I've definitely learned a lot through the process of being a commissioner of leagues that I'm like not really playing in, or I'm playing in, but like I'm just like, kind of holding hands through it. Like, that's really how I want to try and like maneuver forward if I ever do something like that again. And to your point, like, it has gone really well. We're, I think, 90% bought into year 3 already, and we just finished year 1. So it's like everyone's super bought in, like everyone's loving it. Like, it's a good time. It's just like there were some trials and tribulations throughout year 1, and I've learned a lot about myself.
That's amazing. See, it's a great experience, and that's the Dynasty Evangelism. It takes a lot out of you. I love this comment. Jake Billy Krishana is going door to door. That's amazing. So good. Tony here, separating the ego.
Did you just say Krishna? It's Krishna.
Is that what Krishna is? Sorry, Krishna's. Yes, I did just say that. Oh my goodness. Separating the ego and it is difficult. Very true. Very true. Are you tired of fantasy, Joe here? Are you tired of fantasy football because nobody wants to trade? You should try Dynasty Fantasy Football. Yeah. There's your pitch. Lap here. I got into it through Jake and his league full of noobs. I said noobs, newbies. He then traded me Monty Plus for CMC and Kamara, and then I made it my life mission to get better, so it worked. Yeah, honestly, like, what's funny about that is whether it was with Jake or otherwise, like, kind of what Jake is saying too is I feel like you need to just go through, like, I can't push you towards a podcast. You need to find it yourself. You kind of need to go through these things yourself. I do feel like a lot of Dynasty is like learn through experience. Anybody can tell you, but you're going to be a little, hesitant to listen to everything somebody says. And you're going to want to learn for yourself and be like, I know this because I know football and I want to, I want to scout this myself. I want to make my own decisions. But, at the end of the day, yeah, everybody hits that trade where they're like, okay, I need to get better at this fucking thing. Like, I need to like bear down and get better at this if I want to play this long term. And so I definitely know Laposaurus has done that. We have seen that in our league. So shout out to him. More here. Jay got me into DU. Thanks, Jay. Shout out, Jay. Appreciate you, the big boy. Good stuff. Now I get to waste 2 hours a day reading whack gifts, he says.
Fucking complainer.
Yeah. We offer this really great space, and this is what you say about it? No. All right, let's move it forward. Super fun stuff here, and thank you for everybody in the chat. Appreciate you all, seriously, so much. So much fun in there in the Discord. All right, what is trust in fantasy football? Jake, hit us with this one. This is a super fun topic. What do you got here for us?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this. Like, we constantly are making different trades with different people, but sometimes it's the same people. Sometimes you're building relationships with your competitors, the other managers within your league. And I think, like, naturally we have a lot of distrust with people we're competing against. But like, I think that there's this innate need to build trust with those people that you trust the least. And I wanted to talk a little bit about where your head is kind of at. Like, when I talk to you about interactional trust, me interacting with you, what is that trust like? And I think it's a prime example. We haven't made trades together. I think we've been in like 5 leagues, 6 leagues, maybe 7. I think we've made maybe 1 trade in those 7 leagues in what? Like, it's got to be 3 years, 4 years now. And in the past month, we've gotten 2 deals done. Like, how did we get there? Is that just based off of necessity? Does that mean that you trust me as a like fellow person to trade with? Like where's kind of your head at?
I do not trust you at all. There's no trust in terms of like in a league. Do I trust that the trade is going to be fully fair and in my favor when you send me an offer? No, absolutely not. Do I trust that like you'll try to align with like the strategy of my team? Yes, you will definitely try to do that. You will, try to make it seem like it's something that is beneficial to my team, for sure. But um, the reason that those trades got done, especially the two in Dynasty Underdog one, is because I think it's much more situational than anything. Those trades wouldn't have happened if I wasn't in like this extremely deep rebuild. And if you weren't in an extremely heavy contending situation, right? Like you wouldn't necessarily make these trades the same way you did. You might not make one of them for sure. One of them you probably would have, the Jamar Chase one, I would assume. But either way, it was out of necessity mostly for me. You were the most likely trade candidate who had the most assets. I wanted first round picks, and you had a lot of them still. And so, yeah, I think it was a trade out of necessity. But at the end of the day, those trades, I do trust that, like, if I go back and forth with you enough, it will get to a place where I feel comfortable with it, even if it's not like fair, I guess, in the eyes of others. But I do trust like we can get there on that. Yeah, for the most part. But that's like very specific in terms of the like trade interactivity of like you and I. But like if I'm making another trade in the league, I mean, first of all, I can kind of hide what league it's in now because of Sleeper for the most part, or I can just ask you generally. But like I think you're going to give me an honest answer if I ask about a trade, regardless of the league, even if we're in it together for the most part. So in terms of that trust, maybe I have too much trust from that perspective, but I also am giving my honest answer to you if you ever ask me, or Uriah ever asked me, without any bias to like my own team or something like that within that league. Like I'm not going to do that. So yeah, I guess I'll pause there if you have any other questions or want to take it anywhere else.
Yeah, no, I think you took it to a really good spot that I didn't even really think about. And interactional trust, I think, has multiple layers because we do have a Discord. We do have a lot of people that are in our leagues that we're constantly interacting with. We're giving away some of our valuation differentiations and differences to the group when we're voting on a poll, or we're providing feedback about a roster build or things like that. And I think we have to be honest with ourselves when we're doing that with an individual who's asking for help. And that in its own right kind of takes away some of our competitive advantages, sure. But at the same time, I do think that it builds trust amongst us when we're working with people on trades. I do find that when I can like hit a spot where the value kind of makes sense for both people, the conversations keep going. And if I want to navigate to a place where I don't want to just outright reject, but I want to push the value away from where its starting point is, I'll do that too. And I think that is part of the process, but I do think that it inherently also builds trust. Like, I think that that's kind of like where my head wraps itself up. And like, I think about a lot of the people that are just posting in our comments. Like, I think of the interactions that I have with Joe. I think about the interactions that I have with Big Boy. Like, I don't trust them as competitors, but I trust them to know that through the experience of us offering trades to one another, we're doing it with the same intent, which is one, to either acquire whatever asset we're trying to acquire. And that could be masked. That's totally fine. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. But I think it's about like the general valuations of like where that stands. And so for me, when I'm thinking about trust, I know that I can't trust anyone, but I do think that I'm building trust moving forward to think through the ways of how someone else is thinking, how and what to read into the different interactions that they're providing me, because those multiple interactions end up building up into something, right? Like, you have some thought about it. Maybe it's even more distrust. I don't know. I think that's just dependent on the person and the way that you interact with them. I definitely have those folks across the multiple leagues that I'm in where I'm like, I gained literally fuck all from that interaction. I don't trust you, like that. And that's totally okay.
That's awesome. No, that's good stuff. I mean, I was thinking of a couple different. Ooh, my headphone just spazzed out. I was thinking of a couple different perspectives from this. One was like the listener leagues are very unique because you also have the Discord, and you build a lot of trust through that because you end up talking about a lot of the trades in there, and we're all very honest. And so I think inherently, you know each other a little bit better. So there's that, like the trust you're talking about, like you kind of build more, you build easier, trade negotiations through kind of just knowing each other, talking with each other. You know that there's going to be less BS, right? Because like you've heard my strategy. You've heard a lot of what I think of these players, so you're going to come to me and be like, here, this is a trade that you would do or you wouldn't do, or for this reason for your team, whatever it is, and we're just going to have a conversation for the most part. So that level of trust is just a little bit different than I feel like most leagues. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Where all of that would come from like banter within the league or come from, actual trade negotiations that you would have. So I mean, I definitely think that's the way that trust is best built in like your typical league, is like, yeah, getting those trades done, not being crazy about the valuations, being able to come together somewhere and not be a lunatic about those kind of things. Real quick here, Joe, I think trust has become less of an issue with the increased availability of information, injuries, trades, etc. I think it's really more about individual valuation on players. And yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. Real quick here, Ricky S. Personally speaking, the more open, honest, not a jerk people are, I found more trades get done between the two parties because you aren't trying to nickel and dime and you're also able to discuss. And yeah, that's definitely a huge part of it. Yeah, he was just saying discuss differences in player values, but in general, yeah, I think the point stands to discuss. Um, yeah, it's a great point, man. Like trust is huge in this thing, and like we do talk about a lot about like masking like your targets and like what you're trying to do to get the best deal for you, and of course you're going to do that. But when you're having these discussions, like people can suss you out if you're being if you're being an ass, or if you're being dishonest, or if you're really trying to take advantage of them, if you're trying to sell them a story or something like that, all the things that we kind of hate that people do. Like I think that's what we're getting at more than anything, is like those things are kind of the big no-nos, I would say. The big things to avoid to kind of keep the conversations flowing. But yeah, I don't know why I thought more about this in terms of like the advice that we give to each other and stuff like that, in terms of like that level of trust, right? Because like even in the Discord and stuff like that, um it's like we are giving our honest opinion, but it's like, that how much do you trust somebody, you know what I mean, to and when I'm reaching out to you on the side and all that, because we're all in these leagues together. So it's a yeah, it's a really delicate like piece of the puzzle with Dynasty.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. It really is. Like the way that we interact with people, not just us, like everyone interacts with each other in the Superflex Super Show Discord, the Dynasty Underdog Discord. Like it is truly just like a melting pot of different thoughts, different processes. And I think that in its own right helps me build trust within or amongst my fellow competitors. And I think it's really beautiful because we are all kind of approaching this in slightly different ways. We do think that there are slightly different directions in which you can make your team better versus your opponent. And like at the end of the day, trying to take on those different strategies and make them the winning team, show that your path is the right one, is truly the best benefit of it. It's not really like I want to take advantage of my competitor. It's like I want to do this thing that I've set out to do, and I want to do it well. That's where I think this game has really gone, at least over the last few years, and especially within the community that we've been able to build. So it's been pretty great.
Love that. Definitely a good dismount there. Real quick, Jay here from the comments. Let me tell you how much better that player that I'm giving you is than the garbage I'm reluctantly getting back. I always love that one, man. Like when somebody tries to tell you that, it's most of the time I literally don't respond anymore. I just move
Smart.
on. I'm like, because I feel like that gives that sends the best message. You know what I mean? It's like just discontinue that business in my
Yeah.
chat, please. Jeez. But yeah, no, trust is a huge thing here, and it's so funny because it is so. I think it goes against like the ethos of a lot of the strategy in this game, where it's like you said, you're in a competitive setting. You're not typically trying to be like super honest with your opponents in any kind of competitive setting, but there is that kind of there's the crumb of like honesty that you do need to have good relationships within your leagues. Otherwise, people can't stand you. And so, yeah, I think it's definitely a foundational piece of Dynasty that we all need to kind of think about. So good stuff, bringing it to DU. Love that. That was definitely kind of an under the hood topic. We always love those. We have another one here. One more topic before we get into a couple Dynasty trades. Facial. Did I read that right? Facial reconstruction, roster construction. All right, what do we got here, Jake? This is
Dude, I
this is
told you
about DU5, right? This is DU5.
this is about DU5. This is about a friend of mine. Shout out Lapisaurus. Shout out Luis. He decided to go in a very completely different direction of, I think, what most people would try and do post startup. And I really wanted to just talk a little bit about all of the work that he's done post startup and kind of sitting where we're at. This was one of those like ayahuasca thoughts that I had in the woods. And I was just like thinking through what his team looked like. And I, for some reason, was thinking about his trades more than my own. And then funny enough, I got back on Sunday and he was telling me like, oh, I just need one more trade to get to 20 trades on this build. Like, I really want to do that. And I was like, oh, that's sick. Good for you. And then because I didn't realize how many it had been, I just knew that he like completely gutted his team. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the process, but I don't want to talk too much about the trades because I don't really care about the trades themselves. I want to talk about how he got basically a facelift to his team and whether or not we think that that's a really good direction to go. It's something that we believe in. And this isn't us trying to like derail or bring down his build. He told me straight up when I told him that I was thinking about creating this, that, you know, he's very confident in this build and he truly backs it. So it's like he can defend himself in this space no matter what. That being said, like I alluded to, 19 trades, 5 of them were either pre-startup or within the startup themselves. So I really just want to talk about the 14 trades post-startup and how it impacted his team. So the startup draft roster looked like Jalen Hurts, JJ McCarthy, Russell Wilson, and Jameis. And I'm not going to give all of the roster. I'm just really trying to talk about like the key pieces. I know whole roster construction is helpful, but just to clarify here, I believe it's like 30-ish rounds. So just a heads up. Alvin Kamara, James Conner, Jalen Warren, Zach Moss, Damian Pierce, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Sincere McCormick, Dylan Laub. We'll talk about that. Drake London, Garrett Wilson, T. Higgins, Jerry Jeudy, Jalen McMillan. I forgot his name. Jordan Whittington. There we go. Wan'Dale Robinson. And then at tight end, we got Dallas Goedert, Mike Gesicki, and Noah Fant. He also drafted rookie picks 107, 108, and 110. And he also traded away a 26 first to get into an additional 6th round startup pick. So all of that being said, just give me kind of your first thoughts of where you think that post startup build is. Is that a contender? Is that kind of a roster that you would feel confident in moving forward? You're muted.
Damn, summoning Uriah even though he's not here. Yeah, so I don't think I don't hate this roster at all. I don't think it's like a top 3 team or anything like that. I think it's probably has some legs to be a contender, but it has some work to be done, right? Like those picks are part of the work to be done, whether you trade them or whether you utilize them in the rookie draft, right? So one way or another, there's more to add to this team. I think I would definitely be wanting to adjust some things as we move forward, but I like a lot of the pieces. I mean, Hertz is a really nice piece, right? Kamara definitely has some trade value still. London, I love that piece. I love Higgins. Wilson's a good piece. And those picks are definitely valuable. So, I mean, there's a lot to work with there, but it's not my like favorite build coming out of a draft. Um, but it's not my least favorite either. I think there's some good assets.
Yeah, and I think if I remember correctly, he actually traded the 26th first for a first. I think it was either the 107 or the 108. And in his mind, he was trading what would be a later pick in 2026 for an earlier pick in 2025. That was, I think, the logic behind that thought process.
Whew. That's so tough to do, man. I've seen people in the listener leagues get in trouble doing that before. I forgot who did it in, I think, DU2 or DU3. They traded like future picks for the current year's picks, kind of trying to play that game a little bit, and it backfired completely, I think. And that future pick ended up being super high. And not that that's going to happen in this situation. You just have to be careful with that. And I say that because if that was the case, 107, 108, 110, how much? I mean, I guess it's going to be higher than your 111 or 112, but like if it's the 110, it wasn't much of a jump. So you want to be careful with that kind of thing.
I think it was the 107 or the 108, just to clarify. Yeah. But I get your point entirely. Regardless, you're playing with fire. So right. After 14 trades, this is current setup as of today. So who knows? The show's going on. Knowing him, there's probably a trade waiting for us to process. So we got Jordan Love, Geno Smith, Russ, Jameis, and Jalen Milroe. At running back, we got Mixon, Connor, Jaden Blue, and Damian Pierce. At wide receiver, we have a few upgrades. We have Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra. Drake London is now wide receiver 3. Jackson Smith and Jigba, DJ Moore, DK, Bele, Lane. And at tight end, we have an upgrade at McBride, still keeping Gesicki, Goddard, and Juwan Johnson. Total number of picks left, though, is the 26th fourth, and in 28, a third and a fourth. No other picks available. Those are the only 3. So with that all being said, just to kind of give like a position by position breakdown, we went from Hurts, JJ McCarthy, Russ Jameis to Love, Geno, Russ, Winston Milroe. After that, we go from Kamara, Connor, Warren to Mixon, Connor, Blue, and Pierce. From wide receiver, we go London, Wilson, Higgins, Judy, McMillan to Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, London, Jackson Smith and Jigba, DJ Moore. And then at tight end, we really just added Trey McBride on already Gesicki, Goddard, and Juwan Johnson. So with that all being said, like when you think of, and this is probably really important to the listeners, I should have probably started off with this. This is a 12-team Superflex PPR, actually tiered PPR, sorry. That's half point for running back, full point for wide receiver, and 1.75 for tight end. So there is a nice bump for tight end, aka adding some additional value to Trey McBride. And then it is a start 10 standard DU listener league. It is start 1 quarterback, 1 wide receiver, 1 running back, 1 tight end, and then the rest are flex plus a super flex. So start 10, and yeah. Just kind of give me your thoughts off the bat. How do you perceive kind of this build, knowing how, different warp curves exist in this league? I think you use some of the Dynasty Daddy tools. Like when you think about this league, like where does your head kind of go?
Yeah. I mean, like in a typical league, this roster is definitely, I mean, in general, this roster might be competitive in this league. And in a typical league, this roster, start 10, this roster is definitely pretty competitive. I think he has a good starting roster. I do like a lot of the moves he made. I mean, we do kind of depress some of the QB value in this league if you're not super accurate, interceptions, those kind of things. So maybe, that downgrade from Hurts isn't as impactful in a league like this. So I can understand that. I think, running backs do get kind of a bump in this league. Pretty thin there, honestly, but it's okay. I mean, I'm not like, me and running backs, you can find a way into players, but he has just a few of those. I love the receivers. Obviously, Chase, Amon-Ra, London, I think can have really high impacts in this league, given the setup. McBride as well. That's a great addition, and I do think he probably used those picks 107, 108, 110 pretty well, honestly, given some of the assets he has. So give him a lot of credit there. But also the fact that he has no other picks, and knowing we have 26, 27, 28, we have three sets of picks. He gave up even more than those three picks to make all this happen. I almost feel like somewhere along the line with Hurts and JJ, there should have got more value somewhere. I feel like, but I don't know. There's a ton of value at the wide receiver position, so I can't crush him there. But he had a ton of value already. Like London, Wilson, Higgins are a lot of value. And I don't know. So I feel like there could have been something else done here. That said, I don't know if that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about the strategy here. This isn't something I would typically do. It's just so much work to do. And it feels like he potentially drafted assets that he wasn't like, not that you always have to draft assets you're in love with, but maybe drafted assets more for the idea of moving them and tearing down and those kind of things. And like his idea was to make a bunch of trades to kind of, kind of what you're talking about, reconstruct his roster, right? Which I think he did do well in a lot of aspects. But also there's a lot of risk when you're making 14 trades. You're not gonna hit all those right. And other people are trying to get ahead as well. They're not just giving you assets. So yeah, like it's not my typical strategy, but I think he made out pretty well and didn't really like completely ruin anything for his future outlook. I would be concerned about not having some of those picks, but he has a ton of wide receiver value that I think he could get out of to kind of churn and look another direction if he really needed to. I don't know. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I like the idea mainly because this is something that I do. Whenever leagues are not cornering wide receiver value, I will do it myself and I'll take on the wide receiver value and just kind of hoard it. I just don't know if I would do it to this extreme. Like, and I don't mean the value itself, I mean the investment to get into that value. Like right
Right.
now,
Right.
you're putting
Yeah.
yourself in a situation where there are so many wide receivers, right? Like this isn't like going like a QBX strategy or a true QB hoard strategy where you're just like holding on to the value that will actually deconstruct other teams. Instead,
Mm-hmm.
you're taking on value, especially in this league format where, yeah, the warp curves can actually line up better for wide receivers than they do for running backs. But in 2024, it leaned running backs versus wide receivers. And there's probably a strong reason for that. We've talked about it. 2024 was a bit of an anomaly. I think running backs were probably a lot more healthy than they've ever been historically. So naturally, they're going to have more adjusted warp than ever before because they're actually playing more games. That's awesome. It makes sense. That all lines up. Now, when I think about the moves themselves, and I know you had asked me actually before the show if I had the trades, I just wanted to talk about, I guess, a couple because I think some of them actually really make sense. Before the Sam Darnold signing, he ends up trading into Jackson Smith and Jigba for the 107 and 108. And that was pretty early on. So I think that really makes a lot of sense to me. Getting into a 26 first for Jerry Jeudy and Jalen McMillan also made sense to me. So he got out of those two assets and got into a first. He then jumped into what looked like to be DJ Moore and a early second for Jalen Warren and a 25 first. I don't remember where the 25 first was. I want to say it was somewhere in like the 110 range, to be honest with you. And then he also made this move that was the one that kind of impacted the league the most, I would say, which was when he traded away T. Higgins, Jalen Hurts, and not his 26 first for Justin Herbert and Jamar Chase. So this was the trade where he downgrades, quote unquote, or down tiers to Herbert, but ends up upgrading from Higgins to Chase with basically that first. All in all, I think those types of moves early on made a lot of sense. And it was one of those situations where I just think that there's just not enough depth here to put yourself in the situation that you want to be. I think the starting lineup, realistically, at the end of the day, will probably be a top two team. I just am concerned with when you're structurally kind of creating this type of roster, Doing it in year one just seems a little too chaotic for me. And this would be something that I would personally probably try and do in a year two or year three build. And the reason for that is because naturally, I am now changing different rosters in the way that I want to, versus now, like when you think of the other contending teams, Billy's team happens to be one of them. Big Woy happens to be one of them. Miami Jeff happens to be one of them. Like those four teams specifically, when I think about them, they exist in such a way within the league that I don't think that you're actually like making your team that much more competitive over a longer window. Instead, you're just making your team very competitive in the first year. And you're really going to have to hope that there's going to be another contending build that is going to be willing to invest into your most, prized assets. This is something that I've dealt with in DU2 personally, where I have a very similar build to this. I've been keeping it, for 4 years now, but like it's gotten to a point where Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, AJ Brown, Tyreek Hill are now getting to a place where no one wants them and they're going to die on my roster, right? Like I'm sure I can find a way to tier down from one of the top two assets or top three assets I just said. I don't think that that's not available for him. It's just, it gets harder because the way that the league is going to work in a dynamic function, I think you'll have to be very, very specific with how you move through it. That all being said, I really do like the moves that I just talked about. I thought all of those trades made a lot of sense to me, especially right
Yeah.
after the startup. And I think he really made a path to getting into elite assets at basically every position that he wanted to, except quarterback. And that's kind of where I'm most concerned. It's like feeding your team build around just wide receivers in a super flex format where, yes, quarterbacks are slightly devalued from a traditional warp perspective. I get it, but also at the same time, you really need to make sure that Geno Smith is hitting basically like mid-tier QB2 for this to actually have the value that you want. And you're probably actually hoping for him to be like QB13 for this to really, really, really be where you want it to be. And I just think that you're putting all your eggs, I guess, in one basket is the very like traditional saying that I would be most concerned with. That's all.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I do think a lot of a lot of the moves as you kind of went through them were really solid moves. So you can't hate on those values that he got. And I think it's going to be a competitive team. And I do, like I said at the beginning, I think the tier down in the quarterback room, it with like you're saying with the kind of the warp curve, it makes sense to kind of go that direction, but it is a little thin across the whole roster outside of receiver. And like you said, getting out of those assets, like who's really going to be the target audience at that point, and are they going to want to deal with him? And to Ricky S in the comments here on YouTube, Angel's question, if he was able to acquire that many wide receivers within the range tier, how willing will the league be to buy those wide receivers? And I think that's kind of the same point we're making here. And he says, not saying it'll happen, but more food for thought. And I think it's great food for thought. Like getting into, we talk about it a lot, getting into these assets, and like it'll be easy to get out of it, but it does matter if one player is affecting the league this much, like who are going to be the people that are willing to trade with him at this point if he's kind of tapped on all the doors of like the non-competitors. It's like, are they going to be willing to take those assets back over for whatever, cost at the end of the day? It's like, I feel like you got to be careful when you're doing this. And I mean, he honestly, the assets he got into are super safe. So he did a good job. I'm not like trashing his strategy at all. I think it was a really good job. I think it's a little chaotic for me. I wouldn't personally do it. He got into a good place, but there are some thin spots on that roster. Whereas like mine, again, I like trying to come out of a draft not like perfectly set, I'm going to make moves, but like I like to have a good foundation. You know what I mean? And for me, it's been, I got lucky in this league, to be honest, with like some of the picks and some of the things that fell to me, I feel like, but I have a little bit more depth, I feel like, to sustain over the season. And I still have some of those high end assets where I didn't, and I still have, I think, some first round picks and whatnot. And so it's like, that's the part I think both of us looked at this and we're like, shit, like there's no picks there. And which to Tony's perspective here, less need strategy, fuck them picks, give me proven value. I do I do prescribe to that. I just made a trade we're going to talk about in a minute where I dished off my 26 or A26 and my 27 first for proven veterans, right? So I'm not opposed to doing that, but I think it needs to, the context is very important when we're talking about these 14 trades being done in a very tight window by all one person. I think it changes the league dynamics a little bit. And so you kind of have to think about it through that lens as well. So yeah, it's super interesting. He did a really, really good job, though, I think, from his initial roster getting into more sustainable assets long term for this league. Whether he can get rid of them or not, that's a question. But
Yep.
I do think he got some really amazing assets. So shout out.
Shout out Lapisaurus. No, it's honestly incredible work, and I think it deserved its own segment because it really is just. It goes to show, like, when you put forth the effort, you can build yourself into a team from like a very different position coming out of the startup to where it is now. And
Mhm.
I would much rather the current roster over the startup roster, and I think that's kind of my biggest takeaway. Like, if from an impatient perspective, I would rather this roster. From a from knowing how leagues typically will function and have windows, I think he probably could have found other avenues at more cost efficient ways to build something similar if he was maybe a little bit more patient. And I guess that would be my biggest takeaway to him is just like, hey, this is awesome work. You're now really functionally doing a very good job at navigating the different trade spaces. It's now about slowing that down a little bit and trying to make sure that you're doing it at the most efficient way possible for a team build so that you're not diving all in. Because I do think that there's a time and place for that, and it doesn't have to be in July, right? Like, it's too it's too fucking early in the year for a startup year draft for you, or startup year league, to be this into it. And by that I mean like fully committed through 2028. That I'd want to wait a little bit longer to have something like this. Ricky S has one final question that it's worth talking about. Would a
Yeah.
trade deadline existing pivot this type of strategy for y'all, or irrelevant? And I do think that it would pivot, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, if a trade deadline exists, I can't go all in the way that I would want to. I do typically play more conservatively, and the reason behind that is simply because assets become less fluid. Like, they naturally have windows where they can't be moved, and therefore they have, unfortunately, their fluctuation in value also increases, right? Like, that window, that 2 to 3 week window before the playoffs, typically that's when it happens. People are going to price gouge the shit out of contenders. Like, that gets me further away from wanting to have those in-season trades. And so I'm actually more likely to try and get into certain values earlier on in the season, but I still wouldn't want to do it now unless I know that for a fact I'm getting into all the assets that I think will drive my roster to a place that I think is going to want to be at. That's, I guess, like where I need to be is making sure that I'm targeting that at the right time. But having or not having a trade deadline allows for you to have a lot more flexibility with that, and kind of lets you put all of the eggs into player assets rather than having it just stuck in draft capital.
Yeah, I completely agree with Jake here. It definitely is going to change what you're doing. You're going to want to be more conservative if you have that deadline for sure. I don't really have anything else to add there. Lapisaurus here. I appreciate the insight. I do agree with the roster having thin spots, and it's something I think I'm going to need to address sooner than I'd want to. Yeah, don't get. I would kind of just not get overzealous with it though. Yeah, you'll find your spots to do it. I think you have a really good roster, so a lot of assets
Same.
to trade. A lot of assets to trade. Okay, cool. So let's talk about a couple of dynasty trades. We'll talk about DU4 and then DU5, the one we're going to talk about one of those trades. Yeah, that Lap executed. A lot of Lapisaurus talk. Uh, okay, so DU4. This is my trade, so I'll let you jump in, Jake. Jordan Mason, 26 late first. It should be. It's coming from, I believe, the league winner. My 27 first which I was just in the finals, so I'm hoping that it's late, but I'll just leave it as mid, I guess we'll say. So Jordan Mason, 26 late first, 27 mid first for AJ Brown and Brandon Ayuk. Thoughts on this trade?
Yeah, you hit me up about this one, and I was pretty adamant from the onset. I think this is clearly the AJ Brown side. I know that we're in that kind of like weird window where folks are scared off of probably both assets from a dynasty standpoint, but I think that this is like the perfect time to buy the two of them for potentially a late first. And I'll give that as basically, in my mind, the late first is Ayuk, so it's like slightly expensive in today's market, and AJ Brown for we'll call it a mid 27 first, and Jordan Mason. Like, there's a lot of hope involved in Jordan Mason's value right now, where it's Aaron Jones gets injured and then Jordan Mason plays well and I get another first. If that ends up being 3 firsts for AJ Brown and Brandon Ayuk, it's like, okay, great. But if you end up winning the league because you've added significantly more depth, you've now added 2 starters, hopefully for playoffs, versus maybe only 1 starter in that trade. That's kind of the way that I saw this, and that's why I would lean to the veteran side. But yeah, what was your logic?
Yeah, that logic is kind of where I was going with it. I think also a week ago, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, I kind of mentioned that I thought AJ Brown was undervalued. Just kind of looking at KTC, looking at the ADP, I was like, yeah, he's undervalued. He's somebody I want to go after, and so I kind of thought about it the same way here, where I'm like, okay, if I'm trading a mid first and I'm clocking Mason as like a mid to late second, then I'm trading a first and a second for AJ Brown. That's like market value at at best for the other person, and I think pretty much under market for AJ Brown. So I'm comfortable with that, and like you said, then I'm trading a late first for Ayuk, who I've been kind of waffling on, but I do think good enough player to kind of come back and perform. So I'm okay with that return. I think the value that I got AJ Brown at covers that a little bit, and so that's why I was comfortable with it generally. This team, like I said, was just in the finals. I added a couple nice rookie picks. I think I added Travion Henderson to this team. I had some first this year, a couple of them, and so I felt like I had enough kind of youth depth to be able to go get into some of these vet players, right? Where it wasn't going to like completely kill me if I moved one of those first maybe, and it wasn't worth it, for Ayuk or something like that. But I think AJ Brown's going to be a stud once again, and he's going to add a ton of value to my team. And I'm just hoping Ayuk comes back and can add that depth you're talking about. I do already though have quite a bit of depth on this team. If Deebo Samuel doesn't completely implode this season, I have players like that, not saying they're like world beaters or anything, but those depth pieces that can just like fill in here and there where I feel like I can take on this, this kind of thing while giving up those first. So that was the logic. Yeah. And I will say, just kind of talking about kind of the trade negotiation part of this, you and Uriah both told me that I should take that trade. And I went and I tried to get it for cheaper. And I tried to do it for a first, a second, and Mason, and got clean denied. And then it went back and forth, a couple different offers, and then it was never like back to the original. And then I was like, all right, let's just do this original trade. And it was kind of in the air for a minute that it might not happen. So, man, it's like I always come back to like, you can always go back to the first deal, but it's like, can you always go back to the first deal? Like that person may not be about it. So it was almost kind of dead in the water and just got done. I don't think it's like a terrible deal, by the way, for the other side. I'm not saying like I got away, with murder here or anything like that, or robbery, but yeah, just in general, I thought that yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but one way or another, I was going back and forth on that, and I was like, damn, like, should I have pushed the envelope? You know what I mean? And so sometimes I feel like you got to just take it. But yeah, I always get a little greedy. I always go back and forth if that's the right strategy. I don't know what it is, but I don't know what the right answer is, but we can move on here unless you have more to say about that.
Yeah, no, the last thing I did want to say, just because I think this was really cool context to the trade itself, is that the trade ended up forcing a team that I believe was initially going to be a potential contender out of contention. And
Yeah.
I think it's like one of those where if you're able to move assets in a way that you can now take away potentially like the fourth or third seed and push them into the seventh seed without bettering the fifth, sixth, or fourth seed, like that's kind of how I see this. And to me, you've now just separated the league even more, where I think there's really two teams, honestly. Like I think it's going to be you and probably the person who was I wasn't in the league last year. I picked up an orphan, but I believe it was you and the other team that's also probably one of the best rosters was the champ last
Shout
year.
out Josh. Yeah, Josh.
So I think like for me, that's kind of where my mind went. Like when I saw that type of deal and I looked at the two rosters, I looked at, hey, that team before was a potential contender. Now they're not. He just took away a team and he didn't make anyone else a potential contender by, giving them more ammo.
Yeah. And it was funny because like when I looked at their team, they had a couple first, and I was like, I could definitely push their team into a rebuild or help them out is really the way I was thinking about it. But then they actually had said to me, they're like, I'm thinking about it because either I'm going to try to contend or this is going to push me into a complete rebuild. They literally had said exactly what you just said basically to me. And I was like, yeah, like I thought when you sent this to me, that's where your head was at. Essentially, I was like, I thought you were kind of deciding to go the other way, which like the top two teams were pretty strong to his credit. Like this might not be a bad direction to go because now he also does have, I think, at least 3 picks next year, maybe 4, but he has either 4 or 3 and 2, right, in 27 now as well. And so he has kind of built up more capital than probably most people have. And if he moves, doesn't need to move quickly here, but if he keeps moving in this direction and stays active on it, I think he can add a couple more first and kind of corner the market. You know what I mean? On that kind of build. Like, there's going to be plenty of assets, but I think once you do that and you become a team where it's like you have 5 picks in 25 and 3 in 27, it's like you're starting to take it over. You know what I mean? And you can affect the league, I think, in a pretty big way that way. So okay, cool stuff. Let's quickly hit on Laps Trade here. DU5 again. The settings are a little unique here. I think what is it? Tiered PPR 0.5. For running backs, 1 for wide receivers, 1.75 for tight ends, and then there is also point per first down. Correct?
Yes. Yep, that's correct.
Yes. Okay, so yeah, that's what you're getting here. So I do think that's worth mentioning for this trade. We have Amon-Ra St. Brown plus Jordan Love for Justin Herbert, Trevion Henderson, and Emeka Egbuka, who I like to call Buka de Beppo. Oh my goodness. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'll give my quick thoughts here. I think this is a great trade in general, pretty fair trade for the most part. I kind of like the Herbert side of this, to be honest, even though those are some unproven assets. I really, really like Egbuka. I really, really like Trevion. I think Herbert clears Love here pretty easily. And so if you kind of carry some of that value over with Henderson and with Egbuka, I think it covers the Amon-Ra value. So I think that's a good way to kind of tier down and kind of tier up at the same time at one position. So I do like that side, but again, I think both sides are pretty solid here. What do you think, Jake?
Yeah, it's funny. I was reading back our text messages. I realized that when I had asked if Buka was Puka, and you just made a typo, I thought that I had responded, but I never did. And then I realized that I didn't actually choose a side. So this is going to be, I guess, the first time that I actually tell you my real opinion about this trade. Yeah, I'm actually more so in favor from like an actual contending perspective, the Amon-Ra side. Like I think from a point scoring perspective, you're not probably going to get that much of a differentiation between the two quarterbacks. And from Amon-Ra versus Emeka Egbuka and Trevion from a starting perspective, like I'm expecting somewhere probably in like the 50 to 60 point range difference between the highest score of those two guys. So like I understand the purpose of getting into this. I do think though you lose some fluidity, right? Like there is a liquidity aspect to this trade that I think you miss out on. And this is actually one of
Mhm.
those trades where I think when we just talked about Lapisaurus's builds, having two of those younger assets actually makes probably a little bit more sense for the
Yeah,
elongated window of his team. Like I think some
I
of that
know. Yeah.
additional depth actually makes sense. So like I think from a value perspective, I'm more on the Amon Ra side. But then when I think about the actual builds perspective, I think
Context. Yeah.
I sit there a little bit and say, hey, this isn't necessarily a trade that I would necessarily do. And the worst part is I feel really bad once again while Jake was doing nature ayahuasca. Lap reached out to me and was asking me about my opinion on this trade before he actually like sent it, and also before he like it actually went through. And I never was able to give my feedback to him. Like it had already been done by the time that I got service again. So, I felt
Ayahuasca Jake failed you.
I failed everybody supposedly. Like when I responded to Billy, Billy was like, "Yeah, you gave feedback on this trade like the next day," and I was like, "Did I? I don't remember giving feedback because I thought it was Puka," and I was like, "Oh, Herbert Puka and fucking
But what's
Travion
funny
or
though is
Amon Ra."
it was literally clarified in the moment. You said that, and I said no. It's Buka. I know you hate when I do that. And I was saying
Yeah.
Buka, and I was like, I know you hate when I do that. But so it's still your fault, but it's okay.
Yeah, and then I think I ventured off into my next state of being, and we continued a conversation elsewhere, and then I probably hit another dead zone, and then you never heard from me again. So all of that to be said, I do think it's a good trade for both sides. This is just one of those where I think build specific, I'm probably sticking with Herbert, Travion, Egbuka, knowing where the rest of my depth is and not
Hmm.
necessarily needing to tier up into Amon Ra, knowing that I also have Jamar Chase, Drake London, who else? Jackson Smith and Jigba, DJ Moore, etc. Like, I think that that's more than totally fine to move forward with for the time being, knowing that you still have those players in Travion and Egbuka to move at another point during the offseason.
Yeah. What's funny is I'll throw this up here, Lapisaurus. I had my own vision quest, and I saw Amon-Ra St. Brown say he wanted to come home. Love it, love it. Yeah, I mean, what's funny is I actually think for Matt's roster, it makes sense as well to get the pieces he did, because like it's not a bad kind of, like I said, tier down, tier up at the same time. Like you kind of are tearing up a little bit from, I think, a long term value perspective from the quarterback, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that's more the vision that Matt here, who is the trade partner, is leaning in. And he gets two players that I do think will carry a good bit of trade value through at least the first year of their career, where he'll have quite a few windows to kind of get out and kind of, churn or maneuver into other assets if he wants to. So I think it does actually give him some flexibility, even though I do understand that Amon Ra is obviously the best asset, I would say, in this deal. It's an interesting trade. It's a super interesting trade. I really like both sides of it. I think it made sense in some ways and didn't make sense in other ways for kind of both teams. Interesting, but yeah. Okay, good stuff. I think that's all we got. Is that all we
That's
got
all we
today?
got. That's all we got.
That's all we got. Yeah. All right. Thanks for joining us on this ride today, everybody. This was super fun. It's always a journey. If you haven't joined the Discord yet, please either reach out and find us or go into the show description, and it is there. I will actually start putting it in every like show notes and stuff like that, so it should pop up pretty clear for everybody. Get Yas in there. We love talking to you. It's super fun. Thanks for everybody joining us on the YouTube channel and the comments and everything. We always enjoy interacting with you guys. Anything else from you, Jake, before we close out?
No, just, trust your fellow competitor. That's all.
Oh, don't do that. Don't trust your fellow competitor. Don't. It needs to be a very specific situation, but try to build trust with your fellow competitors is what I would say. Try to build trust
Fine.
with them, and I think that'll be a good path forward for everybody. But yeah, until next time, uh, for Jake, Billy, Uriah, everybody, catch us at Dynasty Underdog on all the socials. Otherwise, we'll be here next week. Peace out.
Suck it.